The word for you today, it is July 28th, 2023. We are in the book of Galatians, chapter 6, verses 2 through 5. So let's go ahead and read that together. It says, "Carry each other's burdens, and in this way fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks that they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. Each one should test their own actions, then they can take pride in themselves alone, without comparing themselves to someone else, for each one should carry their own load." So, when I first read this section, it looked to me like it was contradicting itself. It was a little bit confusing because the passage begins, it talks about how we need to restore one another with gentleness. That word restore is literally like to restore to its former state. It's this idea, it moves on to say we should bear one another's burdens. We need to be other people focused instead of inward focused. We shouldn't be prideful or selfish. We should be the opposite. And then, as soon as this is over, in the same passage, it says that we need to test ourselves so we can take pride in ourselves, and then to carry our own load. And so my question was, which one are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to carry another's burdens? Are we supposed to carry our own load? And so when I was looking and diving a little deeper into it, I find that the two things Paul is talking about are different. The first one, when it says we should bear one another's burdens, it's this idea that we are supposed to fulfill the law of Christ. And it's going back to a specific command in the book of John. It's John 13, 34 through 35. It says, and this is Jesus speaking to his disciples, "A new command I give to you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." It's this idea that a way that we bear one another's burdens and fulfill this law is by loving each other as we have been loved by Christ. And similarly, there's another section. It's Philippians 2, 3 through 4. I'm going to read that as well. It says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others." See, in this scripture in Galatians, it says the main thing that gets in the way, the main obstacle for loving one another and bearing another's burdens is pride. It's this idea that we begin to think of ourselves greater than we are, or more specifically, we believe that we are greater than the other people around us. We stop looking to their interests. We start looking at our own. We get puffed up. We believe that we're more important than they are. And see, when we're following Philippians 2, 3 through 4, when we're following Galatians 6, 4, we realize we need to look to the interests of others. We need to bear their burdens. And so we work together to fulfill this love. And then in Galatians 6, 4, it says specifically how we fight that pride is we test our own actions. It's this idea that we're not looking outward. We're not comparing ourselves to others. We're not testing our works against other people. We are testing our works ourselves. We're looking inward. It's this idea we do not compare ourselves to others, but instead we take pride in our actions because we're only looking at our actions. And so after this, Paul begins to talk about how we should be carrying our own load. Now, Paul is no longer talking about bearing with one another in love, not talking about helping one another. Instead, it's talking about our final accountability before God. See, the word for load and the word for burden, those are two different words in the Greek. The word for burden, the word for load, the Greek word is phortion. It's an idea that it's something meant to be carried by an individual. I think of it like a spiritual backpack. It's something that is yours to carry, yours to fill, and it's your job. Now, the word for burden, it's a little different. A burden, the Greek word is baros. It's not meant for one person to carry. It's not meant for the individual. It's something that's beyond their ability. It's this idea of a great weight, something that has a value or a significance, a lot of times saying like an eternal weight. And so when we look at this command, and the question is, are we supposed to bear one another's burdens, or are we supposed to carry our own load? The answer is both. We're supposed to love one another. We're supposed to fulfill the law of Christ. We're supposed to put others' interests ahead of our own, but at the same time, each of us is going to have to stand before God someday. We're going to have to take off our spiritual backpack, and we're going to show what's inside of it, show the way that we've lived our life. Now, how we've lived our life, our salvation isn't by the things that we've done. Our salvation isn't by what's in our backpack. Our salvation is by Jesus Christ alone. But when I stand before God someday and I take off my spiritual backpack and I show Him what's in it, I want to show Him a life that has been lived serving Him. I want to show Him that I lived my life for Him. I want to hear the words, "Welcome home, my good and faithful servant." See, each of us has a spiritual backpack, and each of us carries it around, and we fill it by the way that we live our life. Now, I find it interesting because when we live like we are supposed to carry one another's burdens, when we are putting other people's interests above our own, when we are living our life by the law of Christ, I think you'll find that you're filling your backpack with the right things. And so part of how we come before God and part of how we live our life carrying our own load is by fulfilling what He has also commanded us to do. Bearing one another's burdens is something that's consistent in church teaching. And it's this idea that when we see someone around us struggling, it is our job to go and pick them up. It's our job to pick up that burden and take it off of their shoulders. And that doesn't just mean that we're supposed to pick it up if we're able. It's the idea of somebody needs $20, I'm only going to give them $20 if I have 20 to spare. What it's meaning when it says bear one another's burdens is saying if that person needs $20, it doesn't matter if you need it or not. Pick up their burden. It's taking the burden. You can't take someone's burden off of them if you don't take it upon yourself. And when we bear one another's burdens, when we love people as we have been loved, when we follow the command of Jesus Christ, you're going to fill your backpack with the right things. And someday you'll be able to stand before God and say, "Look at what I did for you." Have a great day.